Gender Trouble is a landmark book by philosopher and gender theorist Judith Butler, first published in 1990. The book is a pioneering work in the field of queer theory and feminist philosophy, and it challenges traditional binary views of gender and sexuality. Butler argues that gender is not a fixed biological category, but rather a performative act that is created and sustained through social norms and expectations. Butler begins by critiquing traditional feminist theory, which she argues reinforces binary gender categories by assuming that women are a unified group with a common identity and experience. Instead, she suggests that gender is a social construct that is constantly being performed and reproduced through speech, gestures, and other forms of behavior. This means that gender is not a stable or natural category, but rather a dynamic and fluid process. Butler also critiques the idea that there is a fixed and essential, feminine, or masculine, identity. She suggests that gender is not something that one is, but rather something that one does. In other words, gender is not a static attribute, but rather a set of actions and behaviors that are constantly being performed and reinforced. This means that gender is not determined by biology or anatomy, but rather by social norms and expectations. Butler argues that these norms and expectations are not arbitrary or random, but rather are deeply ingrained in our culture and society. She suggests that gender is produced through a complex system of power relations, which are often invisible or taken for granted. This means that gender is not just a matter of individual choice or preference, but rather a political and social issue that affects everyone. Butler also addresses the issue of sexuality, arguing that traditional binary views of sexuality are also problematic. She suggests that sexuality is not just a matter of biological preference, but rather a product of social norms and expectations. This means that sexual orientation is not fixed or predetermined, but rather a fluid and changing aspect of identity. Throughout the book, Butler employs a variety of theoretical and philosophical frameworks to support her arguments. She draws on the work of Michel Foucault, Jacques Lacan, and other theorists to explore the ways in which power relations shape our understanding of gender and sexuality. She also uses literary and cultural examples, such as the works of Virginia Woolf and the performance art of drag queens, to illustrate her points. One of the key concepts in Gender Trouble is the idea of performativity. Butler argues that gender is not just something that one has, but rather something that one performs. This means that gender is not a static or fixed category, but rather a process of continual production and reproduction. Butler suggests that gender is created and sustained through a variety of practices and performances, such as dress, gesture, and speech. These performances are not just individual acts, but rather part of a broader social and cultural system that reinforces certain gender norms and expectations. Butler also explores the idea of gender subversion, or the ways in which individuals can challenge and resist traditional gender norms. She suggests that gender subversion can take many forms, from drag performances to feminist activism. However, she also acknowledges that gender subversion is not always possible or easy, and that it often comes with risks and consequences. Another important concept in Gender Trouble is the idea of the heterosexual matrix. Butler argues that our understanding of gender and sexuality is deeply rooted in a heteronormative framework, which assumes that there are only two genders and that heterosexuality is the norm. She suggests that this framework is not just about sexual orientation, but rather a broader cultural and political system that reinforces binary gender categories and the power relations associated with them. In conclusion, Gender Trouble is a groundbreaking book that challenges traditional binary views of gender and sexuality. Butler argues that gender is a social construct that is constantly being performed and reproduced through social norms and expectations, rather than a fixed biological category. She also challenges the idea that there is a fixed and essential, feminine, or masculine, identity, and suggests that gender is not determined by biology or anatomy, but rather by social norms and expectations. Butler's analysis of gender and sexuality has had a profound impact on feminist and queer theory, as well as on popular culture and politics. Her work has inspired a generation of scholars and activists to rethink traditional views of gender and sexuality and to work towards a more inclusive and just society. Gender Trouble continues to be a widely read and influential book, and its ideas and insights remain as relevant today as they were when the book was first published over 30 years ago.